Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a massive political mystery. We're talking about a country that, mathematically and historically speaking, really shouldn't exist, let alone prosper. Yet somehow, it absolutely thrives. It's a place that completely defies conventional political logic, and in this Explainer, we're going to decode exactly how they pull it off.
Picture your own country for a second. Okay, now try to imagine a federation deeply divided by historic religious conflicts, and then neatly sliced into 4 distinct language groups. We're talking German, French, Italian, and Romansh. In most parts of the world, a state with no central culture, no single shared language, and really deep historical divisions is basically a recipe for total collapse, or at least constant civil war. But Switzerland? It's incredibly stable. So how in the world do they do it?
Well, to figure that out, we have to look at the astute Swiss observer Denis de Rougemont. He honestly hit the nail on the head when he said compartments is the key word for Switzerland. It's this brilliant live and let live structure. The citizens of diverse cantons, those are the Swiss regional states, don't actually need to know each other or even speak the same language to function cohesively as a single state. The whole system is quite literally designed around mutual ignorance within a shared framework. It's wild, but it works.
Section 1. A Nation by Will, the Historical Clues to Unity.
To really grasp this unity, you have to realize that Switzerland wasn't born out of a single ancient ethnicity or some shared royal bloodline. It was born out of pure, pragmatic political will. And looking back at their state formation, it definitely wasn't easy. You go back to the religious wars in the 1500s, and they're establishing these early defensive pacts. Then they survived a brief, highly centralized French occupation by Napoleon in 1798. But here's the crazy part. By 1847 and 1848, Switzerland actually fought a religious civil war, the Sonderbund War, pitting the progressive radicals against the Catholic conservatives. But get this, the war lasted exactly 26 days. Barely over 100 people died. And this incredibly brief conflict directly birthed the cautious 1848 Constitution, which is the grand compromise that holds the modern state together right up to today.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is Alfred Steppen's concept of coming together federalism. The victors of that 1847 Civil War didn't just crush the losers. Instead, they compromised. The creation of the Swiss federal state was a voluntary pooling of sovereignty. These fiercely autonomous cantons came together to share power on a national level, while jealously guarding their individual identities back home. It was a highly pragmatic, entirely self-imposed union.
And because of that history, you get this really fascinating dual identity. Switzerland uniquely balances 2 completely different types of nationalism. At the top federal level, you've got this civic nationalism. It's republican, it's based on political will, shared democratic institutions, and a real pride in their unique system. But down at the local cantonal level, it operates way more like an ethnic nationalism, rooted in common local culture and highly assimilationist citizenship. Seriously, naturalization in Switzerland happens at the local communal level. Local assemblies literally assess how well you fit into their specific, everyday way of life.
Section 2. The Neutrality Paradox. An empty shell? Now, when you hear Swiss, you probably think neutral. And we often think of neutrality purely as a foreign policy stance, right? But it actually serves as the ultimate tool for internal, multicultural cohesion. Consider this striking number. A massive 67.1% of Swiss citizens remain deeply proud of their country's neutrality. Plus, about 75% believe it's very or quite important for the future of the country. It's an essential, almost mythical piece of their national identity. But what does it actually do for them today?
Well, Swiss neutrality has 5 traditional functions. Yes, it absolutely provides independence and facilitates trade during wartime. During the Cold War, it provided equilibrium by acting as a buffer zone. It also offers a service function. Think about Geneva hosting the UN. But the most vital function? Integration. By abstaining from foreign conflicts, the Swiss avoided tearing their own multicultural society apart. German-speaking and French-speaking Swiss didn't have to take sides against each other during the World Wars, simply because their state chose to remain neutral.
But there is a massive difference between the myth of neutrality and the actual practice. On one hand, you have integral neutrality. This is the rigid global perception. A state is armed, strictly non-aligned, and participates in absolutely zero sanctions. On the other hand, you have differential neutrality, which allows a state to participate in economic sanctions while still abstaining from military ones. Throughout history, Switzerland is quietly flipped back and forth between these two modes, depending entirely on what survival required at the time.
And we've seen this pragmatic pivoting play out in real time. When the Cold War ended, the Swiss government shifted right back to differential neutrality. They completely joined the UN economic sanctions against Iraq in 1990, yet fast forward to 1998 during the Kosovo conflict, and they suddenly invoked strict neutrality law to deny NATO military overflights. Why? Because NATO lacked a specific UN Security Council mandate. They constantly, practically shift between these rigid and flexible definitions based on global pressures.
But if you look at the historical data spanning 1950 to 2004, you see a really steady decline of Swiss mandates as a protecting power. This is where the empty shell metaphor comes in. Historically, Switzerland provided good offices, basically acting as a diplomatic go-between for nations at war. But as those mandates plummet, it becomes obvious that this traditional service function is shrinking rapidly in the modern era. The tangible, real-world functions of neutrality are fading, yet the symbolic shell, that 67.1% of public pride, remains totally intact because of its domestic unifying power.
Section 3. Power to the cantons. The anti-centralist reality. Okay, we've talked about this overarching, coming-together federalism. But you might be wondering, if the federal center is purposefully kept so incredibly weak, how does anything actually get done? Well, you just have to follow the money. Historically, and even continuing today, the national government only controls about a third of public revenues. The cantons take around 40%, and the local municipalities take whatever's left. The money, and therefore the actual power, is kept rigorously decentralized. It's a totally anti-centralist reality.
The powers these 26 cantons hold on to are honestly mind-blowing. They write their own constitutions, they completely choose their own political authorities and voting systems. Actually, the canton of Glarus recently lowered its voting age to 16, entirely on its own. They control massive budgets, they set their own tax rates, and most importantly, under Article 3 of their federal constitution, they retain all residual powers. Basically, if a power isn't explicitly, clearly given to the federal government, it belongs to the cantons. They are essentially functional, highly autonomous microstates operating within a much wider federation.
So what happens when the central government decides it wants to expand its power? They run headfirst into the ultimate veto, the double majority requirement. Anytime the federal government tries to centralize a competence, like changing the Constitution or expanding federal taxes, it has to be approved by a national popular vote. But it doesn't stop there. It must also win a majority of the cantons. Every single canton gets one vote, completely regardless of its population size. This acts as a massive veto point, heavily favoring the status quo and ensuring the federal center can never forcefully impose its will on the regions.
Section 4. Future of the Federation. The ultimate blueprint?
So we've seen how this unique, highly decentralized, neutral, and compartmented structure was built. But how does this 19th century paradox actually survive in a modern, hyper-globalized world, completely surrounded by the European Union? It survives through what is known as the Swiss asymmetry. Switzerland remains heavily, deeply integrated economically with the EU. They've signed sweeping bilateral agreements, allowing free movement of people and seamless trade. Yet politically, they remain stubbornly apart. They absolutely refuse to join the EU politically because doing so would threaten their core identity, their neutrality, their direct democracy, and that hyper-local cantonal power we just talked about. They've essentially managed to buy into the European economy while perfectly preserving their internal paradox.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to take away from today's explainer. Look at the European Union today. It's struggling to unite different languages, cultures, and historic identities under one banner. It's trying to forge a common political will without crushing regional identities. Sound familiar? Is it possible that Switzerland, this improbable, practically impossible country, isn't just a weird historical anomaly? Is it actually the perfect working prototype, the ultimate blueprint for the future of a united Europe? It's a fascinating question and one that really flips how we view this small alpine nation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the structures around you, and as always, keep learning.